everyone. I'm pleased to welcome all participants today to our Innovation and Tech with a topic, why do most KPIs drive internal audit in the wrong direction. I'm happy to introduce myself as our presenter today. My name is Sarah. I'm moderating today's Tech Talk. Before we start, we have a few information. This event will be recorded and made available together with any handouts after the event on the ISACA homepage. A CPE certificate will be sent approximately 2 weeks after the event to the email address participants provided when registering. Questions to the presenter or moderator can be asked via the chat function. Please send feedback on the event, suggestions, or requests to our email address. And the next Tech Talk will take place on February 17th. So, thank you. And now you can start.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor to be here. Great honor to talk to you during one of the ISACA Germany Tech Talk events. Thank you very much to Matthias Kraft for inviting me, and thank you very much to Sarah for making sure all the technical details are working perfectly. My name is Maciej Piołunowicz, and today I would like to talk to you about KPIs, about key performance indicators. How do they work, and why, unfortunately, more often than not, they drive us, but not in the direction we want to, actually in the completely opposite direction. It's 3 minutes past 11. The idea for this presentation is to end at about quarter to 12 and have 15 minutes for questions, discussions, comments, whatever you might find interesting. I would be very happy to answer the questions you may have. Please write them down in the chat. If I see them during the presentation, I'll try to answer them while presenting. If not, then again, we'll have those 15 minutes at the end, and I'm sure with Sarah's support, we'll get there. We'll get to all of the questions that you will possibly have. So, a couple of words about me. This is actually a very interesting part of any presentation, maybe more when it's actually in person, because well, I have to talk a little bit about myself, and I have to prove to you that spending the next 45 minutes with me won't be a waste of time for you. If it's an in-person event and I can't prove it to you, then you can just get up and slam the doors. That is a little bit harder when we are online, so that makes it easier for me. Still, I'm hoping that you won't do that, because I really believe that this is going to be an interesting presentation. I am the Chief Audit Executive, Head of Internal Audit Department in BGK. BGK is the State Development Bank of Poland, Polish-only developmental bank and currently the third largest bank in Poland. I've worked as internal auditor for many years, too many to name precisely. I've worked in commercial banks, in Polish Santander Bank, and I've also worked in Polish Central Bank as internal auditor. I've been public speaker during a number of conferences, seminars, webinars, many of those foreign in the past couple of years. And I'm the Deputy President of IA Poland, responsible, among others, for foreign relations. And I have to say, I think that was pretty impressive, because we started this part of the presentation, this particular slide, with 42 people present. And that presentation about me was so good that we've got 4 more actually. So people not only are not leaving, but are coming in because of the presentation, because of who I am, and that's something I'm very proud of. And one thing that I really like, and I haven't put in that about me slide, I like quotations. I like different quotes, mottos, and I was thinking about preparing a quote for this, for our event today. And the easiest one to think is the quote from Peter Drucker. You all know it. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. That's probably the most well-known quote about KPIs. I have to put it in here. The problem is I don't really agree with it. And the counter quote, to make it more interesting, is a quote from David H. Hewell, who wrote a book about Charles Darwin. And the quote goes, those who think that science is measurement should search Darwin's works for numbers and equations. Now, spoiler alert, if you are planning to read on Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species in the next couple of weeks, spoiler alert here, okay, there aren't any. You can actually prepare one of the biggest biological book of all times without really reaching for numbers and equations. So is it really about measuring? What's interesting, Pearl Zhu, the Chinese author, is saying that it goes both ways, right? Okay, if you want to measure, it's important to select the right measure and then to measure things right. It's not only about selecting, but also about measuring things right. It's an art and science, and it influences everything. Because it's not only that KPIs measure, KPIs also influence management behavior and business culture, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in the next couple of minutes. And the last quote I have was is about Warren Buffett. Well, you may not like him, but it's undoubtable that he achieved a lot of success with his funds, with his investment funds. And one quote is that the people he finds it extraordinary that actually people study what's measurable. They study what they really can measure. That's the important part, not what's really meaningful. You would expect people to concentrate on the things that are important, that are meaningful, but people often concentrate on other things that could just easily be measured. So 4 quotes here, you can choose the one you like the most for the motto of our discussion. And just to turn to one of the biggest names in the field of management, I want to give you the explanation of how KPIs work in practice, given to you by somebody that I look up to in my work, in my job, and that somebody is, called Dilbert. You are probably familiar with Dilbert by Scott Adams. That's how KPIs work in real life. The IT support guy answers the phone with the problem saying, "Hi, may I close your ticket now?" Right? And Dilbert says, "Well, no, you can't. Just a second. I just called you. I haven't told you anything." Ah, okay, cool. You haven't told me anything, but that's not really important because the KPI is not about how helpful IT is. That's not the KPI. The KPI is something that can be measured. How many trouble tickets the help desk closes. And the IT guy is not happy because the fact that Dilbert wants something is an obstacle to his financial success. Dilbert's trying. Well, I'll make it quick. But the call is disconnected, the ticket is closed, and well, another success on the side of the IT help desk here. The sad part is that's not that far from real life. Sad part is that if the KPIs are, well, as they are in this example, this is what's going to happen. So joking aside, as it often is the case in Dilbert, this is actually very, very, very possible. Something that I will show you on other examples in the next couple of minutes. So, KPIs. What are KPIs? KPIs are indicators. KPIs should be, and there are basically five qualities of KPIs. They should be important, right? They should measure something that's important. Large impact for the success of organization stemming from the strategy, something like that. They should be easy, if that's possible at all. Easy to understand and easy to calculate and to measure. Those are the perfect KPIs, and those are KPIs that are very difficult to achieve in internal audit. They should be used to assess the performance of both teams, individuals, and they should be impacted by employees, right? General KPI like return on equity of the whole organization. Okay, that's not a bad KPI, but nobody will feel that they are really, really important to that KPI. Nobody will feel that their input is critical here, right? So that's the theory, and what I would like to go through with you is I would like to go through practice, right? Because this is a list of most common KPIs in audit. It's from an analysis done by EY a couple of years ago. There are 10 KPIs here that are most often used. And let's go through them. Let's talk about them, each one of those. And the first one is significance of findings and recommendations. And that's sad. That's sad. Why is it sad? Because I really believe that, a presentation like this should be upbeat. I really should give you something positive. And I hate to start the list by saying terrible KPI is right on top. But what can we do? This is a bad KPI. This is a very bad KPI. It's probably getting less and less important, less and less significant as time goes by and people understand more about internal audits. I used to have my former CEO used to say that fortunately we're not getting paid by the numbers of findings or recommendations that we find. And he was absolutely right. Because what's the goal? I mean, first of all, to be very honest with you, I would have absolutely no problems preparing an audit report with 40 findings and 40 recommendations. They would, in most cases, be absolutely useless, right? But if that's the KPI that somebody wants me to achieve, I have no problem with that. I can do that. Does it make sense? No. Is it possible of achieving? Absolutely yes. And the second thing is, what's the end game? I like to talk to my boss and say that, well, to be very honest, if it would be possible, internal audit in a perfect organization is one that finds nothing because the organization is perfect, right? That makes sense. So our end game is to have as few recommendations as we have, right? That means that the organization is getting better. Of course, that's just the theory because, well, the world develops, organization changes, there are new recommendations, there are new processes, there are new control mechanisms. But the idea, the more recommendations, the more findings, the better, is a bad idea. I don't like this KPI. I really don't. Completed audits per plan. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I mean, there are, of course, different situations. There are situations when you have ad hoc audits, you can't complete every audit that you have in your plan, but those are outliers. In general, yes, completed audits per plan, that makes sense. Length of time to issue an audit report, again, that does make sense. That does make sense. It's not entirely dependent on us, right? And people in my team often say that they don't like this kind of KPI because it also depends in large percent on the auditees. But still, in general, the number of days we take to issue a report, that's a KPI that we can have. And then there are two KPIs: percentage of recommendations that have been implemented or time, and the length of time to resolve audit findings. Quicker the findings are resolved, the better. And those two KPIs, well, I think they're absolutely great. I think they're very good. I think that they are very, very useful. Not for internal audit, of course. That was clear, I hope. Was that clear? Those are KPIs that could absolutely be useful for auditees. Right? Our job as internal auditors is to show problems, is to say, okay, this doesn't work. There's a control breakdown here. There's a risk here that we're not managing. Our job is not to implement recommendations, right? We have to stay as far as, well, not as far away as possible, but we have to stay away from implementing recommendation, right? That's one of the, 101s if you're thinking about internal audit's independence. We can't implement recommendation and we can't be judged on implementing recommendations. And the second KPI here, length of time to resolve audit finding, that's the very, very same thing, right? That could be a KPI measuring the efficiency of the auditees. And sometimes it is. That's never and should never be a KPI that actually assesses internal audit. That's absolutely critical. Those two KPIs, if they were used for internal audit, that's terrible, and that means that somebody doesn't understand the idea behind internal audit at all. Then we have budget. Budget compared to actual hours per audit. Okay, that does make some sense. Again, audits are different. Sometimes the audit is bigger than you expect, but sometimes it's smaller. So on average, that should be a good KPI. Process improvement recommendations. That's one KPI that, to be very honest with you, I don't really understand. Every recommendation that we issue improves a process. In a way, sometimes the improvement of process, adding an additional control mechanism. Sometimes it's combining mechanisms. Sometimes we can even ask for deletion of a particular control mechanism if it doesn't make sense, right? But everything we do improves the process. So I don't really understand what are the internal audit recommendations that fall out of the process improvement thing, right? To me, 100% of our recommendation should be process improving. Business units or auditee satisfaction surveys. And this is actually interesting because that leads me to a question that you probably all expect right now. And that question is, how familiar are you with Italian medieval literature? That's a minus for webinars. If it was in-person meeting, somebody would shout their knowledge about medieval Italian literature. That would be easier. Since it's a webinar, I will assume that not all of you have read Dante Alighieri Divine Comedy in the past couple of weeks, probably. I can just see Sarah, who's looking around. Strange expression on her face. What's he talking about? I'll explain myself. Dante Alighieri Divine Comedy, part of it, is a story about the protagonist going through 9 layers of hell and seeing people in hell. And actually, the 6th layer of hell, according to Dante, is strictly reserved for internal auditors who use this kind of KPI as their main KPI. So don't do that. Don't use that as your main KPI unless you want to go to hell. It's not me, that's Dante Alighieri. Read it up if you don't trust me. That's what he says. That was actually done by Italian medieval writer 500 years ago, this particular KPI. So be careful about it. Be careful. No, but honestly speaking, I expect the business units to like us. I expect business units to enjoy working with us. And I definitely don't want to be assessed on why and how do they like us. Because from time to time, right, internal audit will find something that will raise major issues, major concerns, and that people who we've identified will be very unhappy. And that's good, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? So I'll put it this way. If you have a business units or audit satisfaction surveys, and we have a scale of from 1 to 4, with 1 being absolutely, we do not like audits, we hate auditors, they are stupid. And number 4 is we love them, they are so great, it's the best, absolutely the best way, the best time spent is with internal auditors. If we get a 1, that's bad. That's bad. If we get a grade of 1.5 or 2, that's still bad. However, if everybody in the organization grades us with a 4, that's a problem. That is actually a problem. Because we probably we're not effective, right? We're not finding anything that's important. So this is a KPI that you have to be careful if you want to use it. The audit committee satisfaction, I'm fine with that. And this is one KPI that I will just honestly say I'm very fine with that. That's in the end what it's all about, right? The audit committee, our boss basically, either satisfied or not. If they are not satisfied, that's bad. If everybody else is satisfied but your boss thinks you're not a good worker, that's not a good position to be in, right? So for us, the audit committee satisfaction remains key. That's basically the CAE job to make sure that the audit committee is satisfied. And the 10th KPI here is savings or cost reductions identified. And again, I don't like this KPI. I think it's a bad one. Because I would say that, some of our recommendations go towards savings, go towards cost reduction, and the majority of them don't, right? In fact, the majority of our recommendation is about cost expansion. Because we're concerned with safety, right? We're concerned with processes getting to the end without major problems. So we'll say, okay, cool, but we need to add some additional control mechanism here and there to make sure this whole thing doesn't blow up in our faces or the face of the board within the next year. Is that cost reduction? Well, not directly. That's actually increasing of cost, right? Every new control mechanism that we input increases the costs. But what it also increases is safety. What it also increases the probability that the processes will go smoothly and will act the way they're supposed to. So it does reduce the probability of major issues at the end. However, in the short term, it's not that cost reduction is the target we should go for, right? Those are the most common KPIs in internal audit. There are some others. I've listed them, some other KPIs that I've seen, I've heard about, some of those that I like, some of those that are interesting. The external assessment result, according to the standards, the IAA standards, we have to do external assessment at least once every 5 years. So if it's a year with that external assessment, cool, that's a KPI you can use. It's a difficult KPI to use in those other 4 years when there's no assessment. But once every 5 years, yeah, I'm fine with that. The timing. Either the number of days from start of audit to the audit report or from the end of field work to audit report. Those, again, two KPIs that I think they have their disadvantages, mainly because a lot of those days depend actually on the auditees. But in general, yes, those are two KPIs that I think could be useful. Certifications or other advanced degrees, that's not the main KPI, but one that I think it's interesting if you have, for example, number of IT auditors with a CISA certificate, that's a KPI you can use as one of your supportive KPI. Internal audit turnover. This is actually interesting because this is a KPI used in many companies in general. And I've always wondered about the turnover of staff. And I've always wondered about it, that actually what's interesting is that this should go both ways, right? Because normally the lower the number, the better, right? If you have the trigger for that KPI, normally it's, let's say, at 2 or 4% or something like that. If you have a turnover of more than 4%, that's bad. If you have less, that's good. Okay, fine. I understand where it comes from. But I'm looking at it a bit different way. I mean, if I have absolutely no turnover in my staff, 0 turnover for 5 years, that's bad. That's bad because it means two things. First of all, it means that we're not really developing people. It is sad, and I know that this will happen, but I'm thinking about my team. I'm thinking about their development, and I understand that many of them come to my team for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then they move on to, let's say, greener pastures, right? They move on up, and that's good. That's how it's supposed to be. I don't want my team to be stale. I want change. I want new people in the team from time to time with a new look on different processes, because it's very difficult to keep on improving the processes from inside. Sometimes you need that outside force to help you, right? So I want some turnover. I want my people to develop. I want my people, my experts, become managers, not always in my department, not always in my bank, but in general. That's the goal for me. That's the goal for developing the people. So internal audit turnover is fine as long as we have also the trigger on the downside. We need to have some change, and B, as long as we have a big internal audit department, right? If you have an internal audit department of 20 people, that's probably a minimum when you can use this KPI. If you have 40, 50, 70, cool, that's a KPI that works. If you have 2 people, you can have a turnover of 50%, and that's fine, right? So that's not a KPI that will show you anything. Number of audits per auditor, that's popular, and that's again very, very dangerous. Because an audit is an entity that can be very, very different, right? You can do let's say, an audit of cooperation with, I'm from a bank, remember. You can do an audit of cooperating with Iranian banks that are on the sanctioned lists in the anti-money laundering process, right? That's an audit. Or you can do an anti-money laundering in the bank. The second audit is 100 times bigger than the first one, but both of them are audits. You can do an audit on HR processes, right? Or you can do an audit on paying salaries on time, right? The first one is 100 times bigger than the second one. Each one is an audit. So number of audits, I would say that's not a good KPI, because you can prepare, you can have 20 different audits or one bigger one. That's probably the better way to go. Number of auditees requests for assistance on key initiatives. This is interesting because I like it. I like the idea behind it. The idea behind it is, of course, that people like to talk to us. People like our help. People come to us, ask us for help on their initiatives. This is our consulting side, right? Consulting side of internal audit. So I like the idea. The problem is, in the beginning, we said that KPIs should be easy to measure. That's a KPI that's very, very hard to measure. What actually is a key initiative, and what exactly is an auditee's request for that? If I go to lunch with an auditee and talk about it, did he request? What's my idea? We'll never know. Number of findings removed from the draft report is another thing similar thing actually, because again, I like the idea. The idea here is about independence, right? The idea here is, okay, so the audit should not be bullied into removing some findings from the draft report. They're presenting that draft report, and that should more or less be the final version with just small differences. I like the idea of us being supported by this kind of KPI, right? I like the idea of us not being bullied by auditees who's saying, okay, you can't have this finding in the report because that will make us look bad and you have. However, again, we have to be careful here, right? Because sometimes the findings are removed from the draft report for the good reason. And the idea of the draft report is sort of a control mechanism for us, for internal auditors. And yes, from time to time, we too make mistakes. I know this sounds very strange. Well, at least my team makes mistakes. I'm not going to say that for. From time to time, my team makes mistakes. There are some findings in the draft report that are presented to the auditees. They're saying, okay, but that's not how it works. There's some sort of, miscommunication here. Or perhaps we haven't shown you the document we should have shown you, right? This is simply wrong. And from time to time, we will remove something from the draft report. That's okay. That's not a problem. The problem is if we are bullied, but the fact that something is removed doesn't mean that we've been forced to it. So a good KPI, but a dangerous one. Number of audit issues addressed before final report is issued. This is a surprisingly popular KPI that, again, I don't really like. Because, again, I want my team to focus on the important stuff. I want my team to focus on 3, 4, 5 key events, right? And we can go for 40 small findings, small issues that would be addressed before the final report is issued. But does it really matter? Is it really this thing that helps the organization? I don't think so. So this is one that's kind of, I think, similar to the Dilbert one, in that it focuses us on a different thing that we're supposed to be focused at. And the three KPIs at the bottom are all technical KPIs that in some point of time I actually used in my team, because I felt that those were important things. The consistent use of computer-assisted audit techniques, the skill matrix identifying key internal audit skills that was prepared and filled with the skills of my people, and concise findings and reports, because we used to write too much, too long. So three KPIs that are perhaps not the most important ones, but ones that could be useful. Yes, now the thing is that you can see the end result with this. I understand you can see the whole slide, which is a problem because you should see just from the beginning to the end. Okay, it doesn't matter. What's important here, there are two internal audit departments, right? The one on the left has a set of KPIs that it delivers fully. The audit plan percentage is completed, fully, 100%. Takes them 8 days from the end of fieldwork to prepare an audit report, and the plan was 12. The auditees are satisfied, with 97% of them saying, yes, okay, we are very satisfied with internal audit. And 95% of recommendations are implemented on time. Yes, I remember this was a KPI that I just criticized, but, well, this internal audit department uses it. I can't do anything about it. That's how it is. Right? 4 KPIs, all of them are delivered. Cool. And we've got a second internal audit department that, well, it doesn't complete the internal audit plan as it should. Takes them 18 days from end of fieldwork to audit report. The audited are not that satisfied, and not all recommendations are implemented on time. Question is, which department is the better one? And well, even if you didn't see the slide as a whole, I mean, I understand you've done hundreds of those kind of exercises, and you know very, very well that during a webinar, if somebody asks this question, that the answer is always obvious. It's not the one that it looks to be at the first glance, right? It's always the bad one that's actually good. And that's the case here. The one that doesn't meet any KPIs is the best one. Why? Because the first one doesn't do anything important. They complete audits very quickly because all their audits are clear. They're not going deep. They don't actually see the things that are important. They issue recommendations that are easy to implement, but they don't really give anything to the organization. So everything is done, it just doesn't make sense. The second one is one that goes deep, that dives in, and not everybody is satisfied, and not everything is implemented on time. But those recommendations, those findings are important. That's the key element. So, where does that lead us? I would like to point out this. I mean, back then, at the beginning, about here, there were only quantitative KPIs. However, now as we are evolving, the paradigm is shifting to, well, there are still some quantitative KPIs, but qualitative KPIs are becoming more and more important. And what I really believe is important is the role for main stakeholders. Board of directors, audit committee, the management board, whoever your direct supervisor is, I really think it's important to implement them, to have them in that process. So how to put it all together? Those are KPIs that I believe could be useful. From the audit committee side, the satisfaction of the committee That's one I mentioned at the beginning, an interesting one. The impact assessment, again, done by the audit committee. How does the audit committee view you as an important part of the organization? From the right side, if you can, the external assessment results or the supervision assessment, if you have one, that's always a good KPI to use. Some KPIs for audit assignments. Do we cover all the processes in the organizations by our audit? KPI. Do we complete a plan? Right? That's again a KPI. Important. How much time is spent per any internal audit? On average, because as I said before, some will be longer, some will be shorter, but on average, how much is spent compared to the budget, possibly? Our findings and reports, are they short? Are they concise? Are they timely? That's a good KPI. And use of cuts or something like that, I think that's an important KPI that could be used. And the third group is called, the last group is called inside the team. Number of certified auditors. I'm not saying that every IT auditor with CISA is good, or every IT auditor without CISA is bad. That's absolutely not true. However, on average, a certification is a sign that probably this is a better auditor that who has achieved something. The number of certified auditors is one KPI that I think could be useful. The training hours do not entirely depend on us. So this is a risky KPI, but one that you could think about because it's important, right? It's important to make sure that auditors are properly trained, especially the IT auditors. We simply need that to be effective. The turnover and rotation thing, I mentioned that before. Careful sometimes doesn't suit the organization, but it's important. And skills matrix field, it's difficult to measure, but it's something that I think it's very important for us to say, okay, we've got desired skills in that particular area, we're developing, we're good, or to say honestly to the audit committee, okay guys, but we need to find somebody here, somebody there, some support here or there to make sure that we work as internal audit as good as it. And select 3, 4, 5, 6 is probably too many. Say 3 to 5 KPIs best for you. If you select too many KPIs, then well, people will not follow them, right? You have to have short, small amount of KPIs. There's a very interesting story, research actually done by Stanford University, 2001, I think, about gems, and I'll tell you about it in about 30 seconds about gems because I think it's really interesting. The research was this: if you have two shops in exactly the same situation, one of them there are 6 kind of gems to choose from, the other one has 24, right? And you ask the clients which one is better, and more than 10 times of people, I mean 90% of people say that the second shop is better, more than 90%, because people want to have that selection, right? But then you look at the data and it turns out that the number of people buying from the shop that has less gems to choose from is 10 times bigger than the number of people buying from the shop that has more to choose from. If people have too many things to choose from, they simply refrain from choosing at all. They just say, okay, I don't know how to choose the best one, so I'm not going to choose anything. Right? And this is the same thing that happens with KPIs. If you have too many KPIs, people will just say, okay, I don't get it. Too many, I give up. I'm not going to follow any of them. So select 3, 4, 5 that are best for you and go with it. So, sum up. There's really no one size fits all magical solution for every organization. This is sad. This is sad. If you were hoping for this magical solution that fits everybody, have one, fortunately. I do know that you need both qualitative and quantitative KPIs. The measurement of KPIs is important, but it's more important to talk about what's meaningful, to have those KPIs that mean something, than to have those that are easily measured. And I want you to always cooperate with stakeholders, with the audit committee, with the CEO. Talk to them before establishing your set of KPIs. Talk to them about what's really important for them. How do they view your KPIs? How do they view what's important to monitor? And then, if you agree with them on creation, always keep them in the loop for the reporting process. Whether it's in quality assurance plan, whether you do that during your quarterly reports, your yearly reports, whatever. But I think it's important to look at the KPIs, to go through them with the audit committee, to look at them, to have their understanding, and to have them on your side, because at the very end, that's the key thing. Audit committee satisfaction, the audit committee understanding of what you do, and the audit committee supports you. So that's the key. That's the key, and that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you find it useful. If there's anything I can talk about, if you have any question, comments, complaints, if you just want to say that this was great, please feel free to do so. I would be very happy to hear that.
Thank you, Maciej, for this very interesting and informative talk. I was able to take some points with me for my daily work. There were some comments and questions from the participants that I would be happy if you could comment on them. One person said, I really like those quotes. Thank you. That was from the first pages. Further comment was, nobody but auditors does like auditors, with a big smile at the end. That's great.
Yes, we are very, very, very special. That's true. That's true.
Yeah. And if nothing is found in an audit, then there is a finding. The business unit does burn money, with a big smile.
That relates to that savings or cost reductions KPI. Yes. That can go both ways.
Yes.
To be honest with you, it's easier actually to have a finding that says you need to implement some other control mechanism, need to add something to that process, than to have a finding the auditors burn money. They're not doing that professionally. So kudos to you. Those are actually the more difficult findings, I would say.
Yeah, of course. And a question, which are the KPIs you are currently using and why?
Yeah. From that group, the satisfaction of the committee, as I mentioned, that's one that we believe that it's important. The percentage of audit plan completed, it's easy to understand and always easy to report. The concise findings and reports, that's again, that's probably not for everybody, but I felt that this is our problem, that the reports are too long, and that we need to put some sort of KPIs, because, well, I was unable to basically make sure that the reports are shorter. When we put a KPI on that, when your bonus starts depending on meeting those KPIs, everything changes. The number of certified auditors is another one that we use. And the skills matrix field is a little bit differently, but this is the fifth one.
Great. And another comment on the page with the two audit departments was not agreed if there are a lot of small items to be resolved. It could be a huge amount. This is something that does make sense to measure, I think, as it might show a trend.
Actually, the answer to this particular question was, as you can see, hopefully, that the right-hand side internal audit department is better in this particular situation, right? But doesn't have to be. With the very same set of KPIs and the very same set of results, we could argue differently, right? It could be actually completely different. So this was just to show you that it's easy to prepare a bad set of KPIs, and when we're not getting down to the real business, it's, I would say, easy to misunderstand the situation within those internal audit departments. But I completely agree. It's not that you can basically seeing those KPIs, it's not that you can say anything, right? I'm just imagining a situation when the one that doesn't meet the KPI is better, but it doesn't have to be the case each time. Absolutely. That was a very, very, very good comment.
Sure. And many comments of thank you, this was great. So thank you again, Maciej. It was a very pleasure. And yeah, I wish you all a nice day and look forward to seeing you at the next Tech Talk. That was, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you and have a nice day. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.